Vice President. Thank you for coming and being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start by having you tell us about your personal experience with organized labor, how you would describe what you've done in your lifetime to help workers join unions for a better life, and please be very specific, Mr. Biden.
Well, I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in my household, if you wanted to eat, you had to be labor. It was clear understanding. All kidding aside, we watched what happened when coal died up there, and when we had to leave Delaware, leave to Delaware. My dad had lived in Delaware before he had moved to Scranton in high school, and after that into his early years of employment. But what I saw up there was everybody I knew, everybody I grew up with, you either became a firefighter, a cop, a tradesman, or a priest. I wasn't qualified for any of them, so I ended up down in Claymont, Delaware, where the same thing occurred. And but look, everything that I've observed and everything I've learned and everything that's happened in my career, Vern, as you probably know, has been shaped by unions, not labor, unions. I know how to say the word, and so I watched the men and women who were part of the union movement, and that got involved and got jobs when we were getting out of. I was fortunate enough. I got to go to college, but I watched a lot of my friends that I grew up in Claymont that went out and when they went to work, they joined the unions. Most of them trades, some policemen, some firefighters. And what happened was that I observed what happened to them in terms of their ability to actually live a decent life. Look, folks, we can do without Wall Street. Wall Street didn't build America, for real. They did not build America. Ordinary middle-class Americans built America, and this is not hyperbole. The fact of the matter is, labor built the middle class in America. That's why it exists. And my dad used to say that, Joe, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your ability to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, everything's going to be okay. It's about your place in the community. And you know what happens when business does not, in fact, have to meet a consolidated effort on the other side that's organized called a union. They just take advantage of you. They take advantage of people. They do not care much about. Look what's happening today. Today in the United States of America, you have this whole new idea in business in corporate America, the greed that accepts that notion that, the only people they have any obligation to are their stockholders. Well, it used to be a basic bargain in the country. You build it. If you contributed to the well-being of the enterprise you were engaged with, you got to share in the profits. If you didn't, if it failed, you also took the hit. But everybody was in the deal. But that's not the case today at all. What's happening today is corporations are getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, and the stockholders and the CEOs are doing real well. But look what's happened. Wages for the employees have gone down, especially as they've declared war on the labor house about 15 years ago. I spoke up here talking about, they declared war on labor's house. I made a major speech at AFL-CIO nationally, and that was about 13 years ago. Everybody thought I was exaggerating. Look, you're the only folks that keep the barbarians on the other side of the gate. You're the only ones that will give anybody, the power to be able to live a decent life. Not a joke. I'll give you one last example. What's starting to change, and I've watched it now, is that over the last 8-9 years, not only have they tried to break unions, which they've done, but they've gone beyond that. Now, if you are an hourly worker, you have to sign, 40 million people have to sign a non-compete agreement. Why in God's name does someone working at McDonald's have to sign a non-compete agreement? He won't go across town and try to get a 10-cent raise from Burger King. It's all about depressing wages. Look what's happened in terms of what's going on. You had last year alone, $1.4 billion taken from 4 million workers who were reclassified as management. Because now instead of where you stack the spaghetti on the shelves of the supermarket, but you control the guy who brings out the forklift, all of a sudden you're management. It's wrong. It's simply wrong. It's all about stealing wages. That's what it's about. And look what's happening to corporate earnings. They've gone through the roof. They've gone through the roof, and nothing's happening to them. Nothing's happening. And then when things get bad, they do what they're doing at what they did at GM, and they're doing what they're doing across the country. They go ahead and they make sure they get gigantic bonuses themselves, and then they want to declare bankruptcy, or then they want to change the deal. And it's just wrong. You see it happening all over. And I promise you, I will stop it as your president, because you're the ones that brought me to the dance. I started off here. I wouldn't be a United States Senator were it not for United Steelworkers endorsing me after Labor Day. And Huey Carcella and those guys, you don't remember them, but they were the guys that stood up and they took care of me. The same with the sheet metal workers, the same with the auto workers, across the board. And my state was not a union state, not a union state. But the fact of the matter is, you all stepped up for me. And if you take a look at my record, I have never not stepped up for you.
Mr. Biden, we're witnessing the largest redistribution of wealth in our nation's entire history. While the richest 1% of Americans own 40% of our country's wealth, working families are struggling, paycheck to paycheck. They're working harder than ever, but their paychecks are simply not growing at a commensurate rate. Unions help level the playing field for working families by giving workers a voice on their jobs. They're able to advocate for family-sustaining wages and benefits, safe working conditions, and pay equity. Many people in this country of these recent generations don't even know that vacation is a union term. If you're elected, how will you help strengthen the labor unions and rebuild the middle class? What can you do from the White House with all of the opposition to that around the country, which you've outlined?
A whole lot, and let me tell you why. And I know all my career I've been called Middle Class Joe, and then down in Washington, that's not meant as a compliment, means I'm not sophisticated. But I'm pretty damn sophisticated about how we got here. We got here because labor, organized labor, built the middle class. Now, what can we do? We can do a whole bunch of things. On day one, if I'm President of the United States, you're going to see the end of Trump's tax cut for the top tenth of 1%. It's going to be done. Number one. Not a joke. It's not hyperbole. It's a fact. Number two, we have to start rewarding work as much as we do wealth. Why in God's name should any one of you, or why should somebody who is a police officer that got me in here today, why should they pay at a higher tax rate than someone making 30, 40 million bucks? It's called capital gains. Well, the fact of the matter is, I'm going to make sure that the capital gains rate changes. You're going to pay exactly what you should pay on your regular rate and not have it reduced from 39.5% to 20%. That's billions of dollars that go places. They go only to a very small group of people. Folks, you know how many tax loopholes there are now? When Reagan was bad enough, when Reagan was around, there was $800 billion. It's now $1,640 billion in loopholes. Some of them make sense, charitable deductions, or some of them make sense to be able to get rid of the interest on your mortgage against your income tax. But, my Lord, the idea that we are spending the money we're spending, you all know what it costs. You want to work. You're out there working, even if you have a good union job. Try getting child care in Philadelphia. You're talking $20 grand a year for somebody to do that. You get a tax break for a racehorse. Why in God's name couldn't we provide an $8,000 tax credit for everybody who has child care costs? It would put 720 million women back in the workforce. It would increase the GDP, to sound like a wonk here, by about 0.8%. It would grow the economy. The things these guys are doing is not growing the economy, it's stifling the economy. Stifling the economy. And look, one of the things that, you know, when the National Labor Relations Board was set up back when Roosevelt was doing all this work, it was initially said that what we're going to do is make sure that we not only allow unions, we encourage unions. The President of the United States should be out encouraging union movement. Why? Not just to make it better for the people in the union, but it's the only way to grow America. We grow when you are engaged and able to make a decent wage for all the effort you make, because that's how we grow the country. No, I really mean it. So when I'm there, Vernon, you're going to have, you know, there's those guys, the NLRB are supposed to wear striped shirts. Well, guess what? There's going to be some labor guys there on that, pro-labor people in the LRB, because it makes a gigantic difference. This is all, these guys have pulled this game off for a long time. But it's because of a guy named, I'm going to sound awful, but the guy named, an economist named Milton Friedman, who said the only thing that a corporation is required to do is take care of its stockholders. That's the only obligation it has. It has no other obligation. Well, that's exactly what's happening. Barack used to come in and turn it around on my mantle when he came into my office. And I have a cartoon from the New Yorker magazine. There's a big old fellow in a black turtleneck sweater, black mask, and a black beret. And he's sitting being interrogated at a police department. And on the table is a great big burlap bag with a dollar sign on it. And he's saying, and he's looking at the cop and he's saying, "I'm sorry, how was I supposed to know he was a job creator?" Guess what? I thought the people who made General Motors vehicles in my state created jobs. I thought the people who out there are making sure that when in fact they're in the middle of a damn lightning storm and you electricians are standing up there making sure the generator's up, risking your life, they're creating jobs and keeping people's jobs going. Since when do the people who make the country run not create jobs? That's the rationale where they're not paying you. Corporations went out and bought back $1 trillion worth of their own stock. I know that sounds like, what's that have to do with anything? Well, guess what? If we have 10 shares of stock, they're each worth $1. And guess what? I buy back 5 of them as your CEO. Guess what? They're now worth more than $1. Guess how I get paid? I get 85% of my salary based upon stock that I get to get paid in. This is becoming a racket. And even some of the corporations are beginning to figure it out. It's making us less competitive around the world. We're in a situation, well, I don't want to get going, but folks, it's not fair, it's not right, but it's also stupid for our economy. There are so many things. So as your president, if I am your president, I'm going to make sure that there are strict penalties for people who try to interfere. How many times have you seen people try to organize and there's direct interference now? It's like we all get all upset about stopping the right to vote, you know, your right to vote. Well, guess what? You got a right to vote. You got a right to vote whether you want to be a union. And when they have all these shams going on to make sure that, in fact, you don't get the chance to do that, when they hire outside folks to come in and influence you, when they do advertising, when they have closed meetings to bring you in, when they have people who, in fact, get actually fired, there should be a fine for every one of these violations of the rules for you to be able to organize of $50,000 every single time. And for the bigger corporations, I believe we should change the rule to suggest that the corporate CEO has to pay the fine out of his dollar, his dime, out of their dollar. And folks, I guess there's a lot to say, but one last thing. One of the things that bothers me the most is the fact that if a corporation knows they're in trouble, okay, what's the first thing they do these days? No, before that. That's the point. First thing they do is they give themselves gigantic bonuses. Just like at Hahnemann, just like other places, they go out and they give themselves bonuses, just like they did. And what they do is they end up taking $3, $4, $5, $6 million in bonuses, and then they declare bankruptcy. Why do they declare bankruptcy? So they don't have to pay everybody who's been badly hurt. Look what's happened with the drug companies now. the drug companies have gone way overboard with OxyContin. Well, they all know they're in trouble now. They're getting called to task. What's going on? The major families that own the major portions of the stock in these companies, they're taking their money out, sending it overseas, and then they're declaring bankruptcy to make sure the people who got screwed aren't going to get paid. Like what they tried to do in terms of the same thing with asbestos. You guys, you could write books on it, but it's just not right. And we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. Because I believe the vast majority of the American people are finally figuring out. For the longest time, in the late 90s, in the 90s, and the early 90s, late 90s, everybody made you guys the bad guys. Labor bosses, they're the ones, they're doing this, they're doing that. And you've convinced the average worker out there, they convinced them that you guys are the problem. Well, all of a sudden, they've had an epiphany. All of a sudden, they're waking up and realizing the only reason they got a 40-hour week, the only reason they have overtime pay, the only reason they have sick leave, the only reason they have any of the things that protect them as non-union workers is because of you. And now, when I went up to there was the Rite Aid strike, I looked out in that parking lot when I was talking with the folks and I was walking a picket line up in Boston. And what happened? I looked out there, and I'll bet you 40% of the people there were non-union. They were there cheering. Because guess what? They have just been taken advantage of. They've been taken advantage of across the board. I think we got a chance. If we're vocal about it, if you have a president and a Congress who speaks out about it and intimidated by it, I think we have a chance to start a movement again that's gigantic, that we begin to take back this economy. But the first and foremost thing is this tax structure is all designed to focus on corporations, number one, and number two, individual wealth through loopholes, the biggest one of which I believe is the capital gains loophole.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Biden, let me apologize that I forgot to give you time for an opening statement. Would you like to do
right.
so now?
I'll wait
It seems to
close.
me you're rolling along real well.
No,
if you want to take that time and do that now, some other general remarks, I have several more questions.
Well, look, I hope, the bad news is I've been around a long time. The good news is I've been around a long time. You all know me. I have never not been with you. I have never not taken a risk of being with you, not just with you, but taken risk to be with you. I remember I almost worried about my losing election because I supported Citus picketing. Every single solitary thing that's occurred in terms of the union movement in my state of Delaware, which is the corporate state of America, I have been out, not just supporting, not just voting for, out front. And I'm proud to say that in Delaware, I've been referred to as Biden votes union and unions vote Biden. And the fact of the matter is, you've stuck with me my whole career. But I don't think you take a look, I've ever let you down. Because you are the backbone of the country. That is not hyperbole. It's a simple fact. Without you, the middle class shrinks, and you see it happening right now. We're no longer the middle. No, we really. Vernon, we're no longer the wealthiest middle class in America. In the world, I should say. American middle class is no longer. We're actually losing ground. You have over 50% of the American people in the middle class say, my kids will never have the same competence and capabilities I had because they won't be available to them. It's just not right. It's not, it really is not who we are, who we've been. And one last thing. I have a significant health care plan, but guess what? Under mine, you can keep your health insurance you bargained for if you like it. If you don't, you can move and you can come into a public plan. But you've broken your neck to get it, you've given up wages to get it, you should be entitled to keep it, and no plan should take it away from you if that's what you decide. Anyway.
Mr. Vice President, recently the largest oil refinery on the East Coast closed down here in Philadelphia. That devastated area families. And while we all want a sustainable future, the pain of that closure is being felt right now. The energy industry is a source of millions of jobs across our country. Candidates supporting a transition to green energy have offered general assurances about a fair and just transition for energy workers into those proposed green energy jobs, including union jobs, but the details and timelines vary wildly. While the federal government has given out more than $170 billion in subsidies for windmills and solar farms over the last 18 years, carbon capture technologies are largely ignored, but they're vital for many reasons. What is your message to the millions of workers in the energy sector who care about their communities and the climate as well, but who deserve a clear answer from any aspiring president about their environmental plans and what it means for energy workers? Would you call for an effective 45Q tax credit implementation? How will your administration handle these critical issues of the environment versus jobs?
Folks, look, the fact of the matter is that the reason I get criticized, I have a very ambitious climate plan. We get to zero emissions by 2050. But I believe you have to use everything available to us. As I said, I grew up in Claymont. I went to school, Holy Rosary. I went to school there at the high school of Archmere. And, I watched what happened just across the line in Hook, Marcus Hook and beyond and up through there, and all the refineries and actually shipbuilding too that went up Sun Ship. And I watched how it changed people's lives. It fundamentally altered everything. I propose a rational transition. I'm not talking about immediate, I'm talking about eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, but I support dealing with carbon capture. And I get criticized for it because they say it is just delaying. No, it's not delaying. It's a rational way to get to a place you all want to go, but it provides for the opportunity for people to make a living in the meantime. And it also gets us there faster, in my view. And so you don't have to choose either or, in my view. For example, when in fact the things that I propose we focus on immediately are the things that I get criticized for. For example, we're in a position where every one of the folks, all the steel workers down my way, anyway, I won't pick one union, but all the folks that are worried about what's going to happen to them in terms of the fossil fuel industry. Well, guess what? If we give time to transition into us making sure that we retrofit every major building in the United States of America so that it has windows and means by which you do not have to lose all that energy. That's what's happening now. That's why we need so much of it. We can save hundreds of billions of barrels of oil. We should be moving back. If I'm your president, the first thing I'm going to do is go back to the mileage standards we had before. In fact, that would save over $8 billion. I mean, there's ways to do. We need high-speed rail. That creates real jobs, taking automobiles off the road. We're in a position where if we move in a direction of a green infrastructure, for example, I believe we can build a new green infrastructure, particularly our highways and our ports, by installing 500,000 charging stations. We should own the electric vehicle market in the world. It should be here. We should be the ones building them. That's where it's going. And so the fact of the matter is, we can do a lot of things in the meantime that create really good jobs immediately without throwing everyone out of work automatically. But eventually, we're going to get to a place where no one's going to build a coal-fired plant again, not because of any rule. Guess what? It's not economically feasible to build one anymore because they're the hardest things to run, they're the most expensive to run, and the price of solar and the price of wind and the price of all these things is coming down significantly. So we've got to transition whether or not we were going to go where we want to go, which is to get to zero emissions. There's a lot of things we can do to make sure that people have good paying jobs, a prevailing wage, and make sure that we're not moving in a direction of saying when in fact you move in terms of a new economic development piece, that somehow you no longer have prevailing wage, you no longer have unions. That is not the answer. The answer is to include everyone in this, but to make sure that you have an opportunity to move. And that's why I think we have to deal with carbon capture and a whole lot of other things at the front end. We can keep good jobs, we can transition, we can begin to save the environment, and we can move it in a way that's rational.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time today. I want to give you some time for some closing remarks, and thank you again for coming to be with us today as we talk about these issues. Primaries are only a few months away. You forget, it's next year, but it's not that far off.
Well, folks, I've said before, win or lose, I'm with you. It doesn't matter. I've never not been. The fact of the matter is that I think the future is really, really bright. I think we have an incredible opportunity, but we've got to give the American people a shot. We've got to provide them access to education that's affordable. We've got to make sure they're in a position where they can, in fact, have health care that's affordable and one that you want, you like what you have, you get to keep it. But if you don't, you have access to making sure you have all the health care you need and you can afford it. You don't have to do it by taking down and ripping away everything that had been in place before. That's not necessary. And so, folks, I just think that all I ask you to do is, as I used to say, look me over. If in fact you think that what I've said to you today is accurate, that I've kept my commitment to you, and it's not to you, it's a commitment to the country. Without a strong union movement, this country will atrophy. We need a strong union movement for everybody, even if they're not in the union. It's the thing that makes us competitive. It's the thing that allows us to grow, and it's the thing that forces the greedy folks to have to confront the fact that they're being that greedy, because you're the only ones with the power that can stand up to these folks, besides your government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, man. Sorry I forgot that opening. You were getting your shots in there.
Thanks, everybody. Can I say one more thing? Every time I leave my grandfather Finnegan's house up in Scranton, I'd walk out the door and Granny yelled, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandmother, "No, Joey, spread it. Go spread the faith. We can win this. We can take it back.